like to welcome you this morning to our annual President's Day Assembly. Those remarks which you've just heard a few of were remarks by President Abraham Lincoln. And today's program will be divided into three parts. First part dealing with Lincoln's greatest piece of prose, the Gettysburg Address, a film about John F. Kennedy's primary victory in Wisconsin. And the third part will be a film classic of Ronald Reagan's. So to begin today's program, we'd like to have Mrs. Coach Leone give you a little background to what a number of our students will be talking about this morning. Mrs. Coach Leone.
Thank you. 2 weeks ago, some of our students took a look at Abraham Lincoln as a literary figure. Using the Gettysburg Address as a vehicle for their studies, they decided to do their own interpretations. This morning, we have some very nice volunteers who will do some of those readings. First, Ron McLaren will be reading the original Gettysburg Address. Following Gail Toth, Pam Blair, and Lisa Williams will read interpretations done by some other students. And now, Ron McLaren with the original Gettysburg Address.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation, so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be dedicated here to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave their last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that a government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. And now Gail Toth with an interpretation.
"87 years ago, our fathers formed a new country based on liberty and equality for all men. Now there is a great civil war among us, testing whether our nation can be a lasting unity. We are gathered here to honor those who gave their lives so that this country may live. We owe it to those men to dedicate these grounds as a final resting place. The courageous men, living and dead, are the ones who have dedicated this sacred ground, for their power is far greater than ours. The world might pay little attention to these words, but will never forget the brave actions of the men who fought for liberty and justice for all. To maintain freedom, which they greatly accomplished, we must continue the unfinished work for which they fought. Also, we must respect their beliefs may be carried on and not forgotten, that this nation, under God, shall have a new beginning, and that democratic government shall live forever." This interpretation was written by Krista Pahalski. And now, Pam Blair.
"87 years ago, we declared ourselves a new nation, independent of English rule, free to develop our nation in the belief that each person is equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war to determine whether a nation born out of struggle and proposing man's equality can last. We are met on a great battlefield of that war and have come to set aside a final resting place for those who have died here so that our nation might live. It is right that we do this, but in a larger sense, we cannot set aside and bless this ground because the brave men, both living and dead, who struggled here, blessed it far beyond our poor efforts. The world will soon forget what we say here, but will never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, to continue in the cause for which they gave their lives. We must pledge our lives to the great task remaining in the future, that we should honor their sacrifice through a greater love of freedom, remembering their love of freedom, and vow that these men did not die in vain, that our nation, under God, will once again pledge itself to liberty, and that the government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. This interpretation was done by Suzanne Jenkins and now Lisa Williams.
"208 years ago, our ancestors declared their colonies a new nation, built on the ideals of liberty and that all men are created equal. With the passing of 87 years, the nation was tested by a war within. On a great battlefield of that war, there is a section that is dedicated as a cemetery for those who lost their lives there. Still, we cannot make this ground or any battlefield sacred. Words could not, cannot, and will never be able to achieve what those who struggled and fought here sacrificed. They were willing to give their lives. How could we make these grounds hallowed beyond what they did? We cannot. There is no way. What is said today and what has been said in the past may not be long remembered, but what those gallant men did will never be forgotten. Now, all those are dead. So it's up to us, the living, to preserve what they fought for. We should be inspired by the courageousness and the bravery of the long since dead buried, for they gave their all. Let us hope that those who died should not have died in vain. Let us pray that today and forever we will be able to keep the nation a free nation with a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and they will not vanish from the face of the earth. This interpretation was written by Brian Kistler. And now, Mr. Russell.